Emerging in the middle of the South Pacific, like an oasis in the heart of a maritime desert, the islands and atolls of French Polynesia are reserves of life and a paradise for diving. This is the perfect destination for the underwater explorers Emmanuelle and Ghislain Bardout. After a decade diving in the waters of the Arctic, they're heading for the South Pacific with their children, Robin and Tom, and their collective Under the Pole. In Polynesia, they plan to explore one of the most mysterious ecosystems on our planet: deep corals.
I totally flipped out when I saw that. It's insane.
Little known and rarely observed, these marine vertebrates live at depths of between 30 and 150 meters.
We never thought we'd find this coral at such depths when we started. It's incredible.
Over 12 months, the Deep Hope mission will work alongside scientists to study them and find out if there is any hope for the world's coral reefs, which are under so much threat.
It's amazing and totally unexpected to find something like that in Polynesia. I can genuinely say I didn't expect it at all.
12 months of full-on adventure in the unknown depths of French Polynesia. 12 months of exceptional diving. 12 months of joys, of doubts, of discoveries, and of records to observe the coral reefs in a fresh light. But when you go where no one has gone before, you must expect to experience things no one has ever gone through before. On board their boat, the Y, Ghislain and Emmanuelle Bardout and their group Under the Pole are specialists in deep dives. For the past decade, they've been carrying out pioneering expeditions in the depths of the Arctic. The photos which surround them illustrate the joy and camaraderie of this harsh life. The waters of the South Pacific are more welcoming, but the duration of the Deep Hope program and the number of dives at 120 meters make the mission both ambitious and demanding.
The risk of this kind of dive is that a small problem can soon become a major problem, and you can quickly accumulate others, and that's where training and experience are absolutely fundamental. We can make extraordinary descents thanks to the rebreather and the propulsion scooter. Magical dives. But that demands a great deal of rigor.
Over 12 months, the crew will undertake hundreds of challenging dives in the 5 archipelagos of French Polynesia, namely the Society Islands, the Tuamotu Archipelago, the Marquesas, the Gambier Islands, and the Austral Islands. The crepuscular corals have never been studied in Polynesia, so the Deep Hope mission is about to explore unknown territory. But to begin with, they're going to start out in shallow waters.
We're going to do a little dive in the appropriately named aquarium to show the corals and fish to Robin.
Let's go.
We want this environment to last, so all this abundant life we observe here still exists decades from now, so our children can dive here too.
The coral reefs are precious. Along with the rainforests, they are the planet's richest ecosystems. But they are in danger. Under pressure from climate change and pollution. The corals form the basis of the reef. These creatures are astonishing in the diversity of their forms and distribution. Their structure provides refuge for a multitude of species. They are very well documented, down to a depth of 30 meters. Beyond that, in the twilight zones that scientists call the mesophotic zone, little is known. Ghislain and Emmanuelle sailed to the Crio at the end of Obonohu Bay. The Crio is a research center for coral ecosystems, where Laetitia Hédoin works.
This is the whole aquaology zone where we can keep the corals alive. There's some here and behind. It's a new platform. Then we've got some small containers. We can modify the environmental conditions like the pH and temperature.
When she arrived in Maury in 2010, the reefs were in a terrible state. There were practically no corals left. But just 8 years later, they've made a major comeback. Laetitia wonders if the crepuscular corals were behind this recovery. The Deep Hope program, based on the theory of refuge, came into being.
What we found so inspiring about your project is the refuge theory and the solutions which this could bring to the coral reef.
The refuge theory is the idea that the deep corals could generate larvae which come up to recolonize the surface. And if that's the case, it's extremely important for their protection, where the depth is really a critical dimension, which should be incorporated in studies, in management, in preservation. But we here in French Polynesia, we don't know because we don't have access to that zone.
It's amazing to think that for the first time in French Polynesia, we're going to observe and take samples on a vast scale of species and individuals that we don't yet know. We're going to try and understand how they live and how they interact. It's going to be like our own Cousteau dream.
This collaboration is a golden opportunity. At the start of the expedition, Laetitia guides them into the coral world. Michel Pichon, global specialist in coral identification, accompanies them. Today's agenda, a dive to 120 meters on a site at Moria that the Crio has been studying.
We're quite familiar with the zone from 0 to 30 meters, since that's a zone we study. Beyond that, it's true it becomes a bit more vague. But Michel has made this little sheet on which he's noted the main species we expect to find down there. What's the maximum dive time at 90 and 120 meters?
At 120 meters, that gives us 3 hours diving, 3.5 hours. We'll be in that ballpark.
20 or 25 minutes, that's not quite the same dive time. At 120 meters, each minute will significantly increase the decompression time.
And that includes the descent too.
If there's any snag to deal with when you're down there, 3 minutes more is 45 minutes extra decompression. It starts to add up. 1 hour's decompression for 4 minutes.
Every minute spent at depth has a cost in terms of decompression time. The divers then have to spend several hours underwater. Marine biologist Julien Leblanc is Ghislain's diving partner. Together, they share the same risks. For this initial dive, Ghislain is hooked up to Laetitia Hédoin and Michel Pichon via a camera. They want to see the coral species living in this crepuscular world and see how abundant they are. They each have 80 kilos of equipment, a rebreather, 4 bottles on their backs, 2 big ones on the side, lighting, tools, the propulsion scooter. Going down 120 meters is an exercise in itself.
8.64, 200 bars, inject.
190 bars, inject.
Intermediary, 2040, 250 bars, closed under pressure.
270 bars, regulator working, open under pressure.
La descente, on essaie de la faire la plus rapide.
We try to descend as quickly as possible.
On arrive à 40
We get
mètres.
to 40 meters.
Il y a beaucoup de poissons.
There are a lot of fish.
Le ville sous-marine.
There's a genuine underwater city living in and around the corals.
Puis en quelques minutes,
In a few minutes,
on va changer de
we'll
monde.
change universe.
C'est des
It's an
sensations
extraordinary sensation.
extraordinaires. La lumière
The light
diminue,
dims, the
l'obscurité
gloom
grandit.
grows,
J'ai tous mes
all my
systèmes
senses
d'éveil.
are on alert.
J'ai une partie de moi-même basée
There's a
sur
part of me
les
based on the automatic
automatismes
reflexes
de
of
la survie,
diving and survival in the deep.
l'équilibre, la
Equilibrium,
respiration.
breathing.
J'ai toujours un
I
regard.
always keep one eye over my shoulder to check there are no sharks around.
Dans les parages. J'ai toujours un œil.
I always keep an eye on Julien,
Je sais que lui, il a
and I
un
know
œil
he's
pour
keeping an eye on me.
moi, que le temps est compté.
The clock is ticking.
On a quelques
We have a few minutes to make this trip and bring back these corals from the
et
depths.
ramener de ces profondeurs ces coraux qu'on est venu chercher.
Ghislain and Julien move along the drop. At 120 meters on this site, there is no coral. But in the zone around 90 meters, they are present. The coral covering is even quite significant for this depth. Certain corals attract their attention.
I find it quite unique to discover this at the same time with him, seeing him underwater, sharing this. I would never go down to 120 meters, and to do this with him is an experience. We can see that they've come up a bit, but we can see that there's quite a bit of life at this depth. We should tell him to take that acropora.
Ghislain, if you're receiving me, take the acropora just above.
They send their samples back to the surface. Now it's time to resurface. And that means a long wait, around 2.5 hours of decompression, to reduce the nitrogen or helium accumulated in the body and avoid an accident.
Quand on fait de la plongée profonde,
When you make a deep dive, you have a
c'est pas
limit.
tant la profondeur,
It's not so much the depth, it's the time.
c'est pas la machine.
It's not the machine which limits us, it's the person.
C'est l'homme. C'est le froid.
It's the cold,
C'est la
the
fatigue.
fatigue.
Et ici, à 6
And at the
mètres,
stop
on peut
here
aller-
at 6 meters,
on y est presque.
we're
La
nearly
surface,
there.
elle est là, on la
The
voit.
surface is right there,
On est qu'à
and we
6
can see
mètres
it,
de la surface.
and yet we're 6
On est
meters
en
down,
fait-
and it's been several hours,
Et ça, c'est
and there's no way around it.
infranchissable.
On the surface, the scientists wait patiently for the divers. Meanwhile, one of the samples brought up from the deep has especially attracted their attention. A coral of the genus Pachyceras, found at 90 meters.
This is the Pachyceras from 90 meters. We think this is a record in terms of depth for a Pachyceras. Do you know if you saw a lot of them at that depth?
Well, it was at the start, but yes, there were loads. They appear all at once. We were going along the bank and boom! At 90 meters, we saw the first, we took it, and then we looked around, and they were all around. And there were other colonies, and there were others which were even more extensive than that.
For us, knowing this exists at 90 meters suggests it might serve to recolonize shallower areas.
This is a major discovery. It tends to support the refuge theory, the idea that deep corals might reseed the surface of the reef. The boat leaves Moorea. It sails through the Society Islands. 3 islands will be explored in each Polynesian archipelago. 2 sites are selected on each island, with 6 dives on each site. This is a sizable undertaking, involving at least 6 divers every time. They divide up the different depths, from 6 meters to 120 meters. They collect samples. They photograph the deep coral colonies to record their diversity and their quantity. They also install luminosity and temperature sensors to understand the physical characteristics of this twilight world. Each dive is a journey of wonder.
We move through these environments and we know things are going to happen. I know I'm going to make different observations every time.
Qui sont à chaque fois différentes.
The boat becomes a laboratory. The samples accumulate on deck as a hidden world starts to reveal itself.
The first samples gathered are always a surprise when we open the sachets, when we finally see what they've collected. We have lots of discoveries, seeing all these previously unknown species which managed to colonize this little-known mesophotic zone.
And the biggest surprise so far goes by the name of sample number 805, a coral never previously observed in Polynesia or elsewhere. Amazingly, the divers frequently collect this unrecorded species of coral in the twilight zone. Michel spends endless hours studying them. He identifies the genus, but not the species. And it's such a rare genus, he can't believe it.
Is this a totally new species?
Absolutely.
Is that an incredible discovery?
Yes, it's one of the highlights of the expedition. A pearl of our own. It's totally amazing and unexpected to find something like that in Polynesia to begin with. Honestly, I can tell you I wasn't expecting that.
On the list of unexpected surprises on this expedition There is also an island. Since it is so exposed to the wind, it has been little explored to date. But the conditions are clement, so they decide to make a halt.
We're arriving on Makatea, to the south of the Tuamotus. I don't think many people come to this island. It doesn't feature in nautical manuals, except in the official French book. To me, it's a bit like Robinson Crusoe's island, due to its isolation and its virgin island appearance. We're going to try and make a stop, have a look around, and if all goes well, carry out a dive.
Makatea is a rare island. It is a raised atoll, one of only 3 in the whole of the Pacific. Its 80-meter cliffs make it an ocean citadel. Mooring points are very challenging for navigators, and diving is tricky. Makatea is a largely forgotten island. Only 90 people still live here, including Ghislain May.
Hi.
How are you?
Unbelievable. Wow.
The history of Makatea left its mark on French Polynesia. The vegetation hides a scar. The island was exploited, then abandoned.
Makatea is not a Polynesian word. It was a word that was later turned into the Tahitian language. Makatea is a scientific word. It just means white coral. All the atolls in Polynesia in the Pacific, which have the same configuration, scientists call them Makatea. Makatea is special on every level, unique on every level.
For 5 decades, from 1917 to 1966, phosphate was exploited here. It was extracted from these cavities. At the time, Makatea was the economic engine of Polynesia. Then it all stopped. Today there are new projects underway on the island. Notably the resumption of phosphate extraction. But phosphate exploitation is detrimental to the corals. The crew want to know what state the reef is in today. It's an opportunistic dive. A few photos, some samples. It was not part of the initial program. But the most unexpected of landscapes unfolds before the divers. At a depth of 90 meters, there are corals everywhere. An incredible carpet at such a depth, as far as the eye can see.
Là, on voit, tu vois.
Puis on voit bien la profondeur.
You can clearly see the depth from this blue. It's well in the 90-meter zone, perhaps even deeper. They're on top of one another. It's a blanket. We didn't take any photos, but 80 to 90, even 100%. I'm mesmerized, and I was mesmerized down there.
Yes, I saw you were hanging around. And the biggest, more than 1 meter.
Does that make sense to you, Michel? That kind of coverage at those depths?
For coral reefs in general, honestly, no. Given that even in more shallow reefs, a rate of coverage that high over such a wide area is extremely rare. To me, that is something altogether exceptional.
They only stay 3 days in Makatea, but they plan to return one day.
I think we will see each other again.
Yes, it's a very small world.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
These initial extraordinary observations call for more dives and further study. But that will have to wait for another time. The exploration program must stick to its course towards other islands, other archipelagos. The voyage is punctuated by some intense moments. For Emmanuelle, swimming with a whale is a childhood dream and a promise she made to Roba.
When we arrive at the spot where they're supposed to be below us, they're already coming up. Just in front of us, I see Robin, who's not afraid of them and who even tries to get closer. At one point, I even thought he was going to get on the whale's back. In a few seconds, we fulfill the dream. All three of us exchanging glances with these whales.
That was incredible.
Oh yeah, he was in total apnea.
It was incredible.
Did you see that? How many were there? How many did you count?
I didn't count.
You didn't count? I think there were 4 of them. I think it's one of the best days of my life. No exaggeration.
Bora Bora. The mood is buoyant. The expedition is fulfilling all its promises. The fervor for diving is proving contagious.
Well, are we going to dive or not? Are we going to dive?
But when this involves deep exploration, diving where nobody ever goes, they can expect to experience moments that no one else has ever experienced.
Today, Julien is due to bring in the sensors we left in a column of water, here at 120 meters, then at 90 meters, and so on. And that's the end of our mission for this dive. And now we've got around 2.5 hours of decompression left.
Ghislain and Julien start to swim up slowly, respecting the decompression stops.
When we get to 80 meters, I see Julien stop, intrigued by the behavior of a grey shark. The closer I come, the more this shark's attitude catches my attention. We know sharks can swim to intimidate. But I've never seen a shark behave like this. It was an extremely slow, jerky way of swimming, swinging 90 degrees to the left, 90 degrees to the right, not like anything I'd ever seen before.
The shark moves away, then turns around, passes in front of Ghislain, and swims towards Julien.
I'm in open water. There's still this shark swimming against the current. He's coming in my direction, and he leaves the wall at that moment. So we meet in open water. At that point, I'm thinking, wow, this is great, this is really incredible. It's really quite rare to find yourself in such a setting with these creatures so close.
At a depth of 80 meters in this magnificent blue, I witnessed an almost unthinkable scene. I don't know exactly what happened. I dropped my camera. I saw Julien. He'd lost his mask.
I didn't know the extent of the damage. I just knew it had bitten me. And I thought, okay, I have to react quickly. He'd bitten through my strap, so I've got no mask. I can feel that the water is going straight into my loop. It's much harder to breathe. I put myself in front of his face and give a big OK sign.
We were facing an extremely grave situation, since it looked as though he'd lost his rebreather.
I absolutely had to stay calm. If I panicked at that point, at that depth, it's simple. You end up drowning. It's over, end of story.
In such moments, life flirts with death. Julien puts on his emergency bottles. The shark has gone. Julien seems to be handling the situation. But what about his injuries? He still has to undergo 2.5 hours of decompression. Returning to the surface would be fatal.
I can see Julien's bleeding. There's a big cloud of diluted blood around his head, coming out of his hood. I realize that he's been injured and that he's bleeding quite profusely.
I had to not bleed out in the water. If I lost too much blood, I maybe wouldn't be able to complete the decompression. So I've got two problems. I'm injured and I've got blood loss. So it's tricky.
Pass on the info so they can prepare what they need to patch him up, because it's possible his head is going to need some stitches.
If it's a deep cut, can he stay 2 hours in the water?
He doesn't have any choice. He has to stay down there.
He won't bleed to death?
The crew rally around Julien. They're all worried he may pass out before he makes the surface.
Julien is in shock. And even if he tells us everything's fine and that he's handling it, he doesn't look his usual self.
The stop is interminable. Ghislain remains vigilant. Every minute that goes by reassures Julien, and the bleeding seems to have stopped.
I still can't quite step back to realize just how much worse it could have been. I'm just relieved to have come through it.
Okay, come on.
I'm fine, I'm fine.
Where exactly does it hurt?
I took a blow here and one here.
Yes, there are some marks on your right.
I can feel I've got a couple of cuts there.
Does that hurt?
No, it's fine.
Did you feel there was any violent compression of the skull?
No. I felt I was held, but not at all compressed. He was too small to get hold of my whole head. I had a vision like in some B-movie where the shark comes along and opens its jaws and then it all goes black. It was like that, because I ducked my head I saw its gaping mouth. I thought, damn. And then it thrashed around for a couple of seconds, and then it had hold of me. I thought, this damn thing is actually trying to eat my head.
A dozen stitches and the incident is over, at least on the physical level. The consequences for the crew are more profound. That evening, they gather to watch the footage to review what happened, each diver having had a partial view of events. The shark is swimming in an intimidation pattern, exhibiting territorial behavior, but the way it is swimming is so slow that it's unusual. The divers didn't know how to interpret it.
Oh la vache, putain, les gars. Putain.
It goes straight for the head and it's on target.
You can't even see that I tried to fend it off, but it didn't work at all.
Wow, il est pas.
On n'avait pas mesuré, je pense.
I don't think we'd fully appreciated how far these deep dives were going to take us into wild territory.
On allait évoluer dans un monde sauvage.
And end up bringing us face to face with some behaviors very different to those you might imagine.
Comportements qui sont très différents de ce qu'on peut imaginer.
That has unsettled the crew a little bit.
At these depths, sharks are not used to encountering humans, as they might in the shallower channels and lagoons. What's more, diving with a rebreather means the diver does not release that long column of bubbles familiar in dives using bottles, which give the diver a greater stature, impressing other marine creatures. But the accident does not halt the program. The study of the crepuscular corals continues, but no one is left unscathed by the attack. They all react in their own way, dealing with their anxieties.
I wasn't very comfortable down there. I really wasn't at ease.
Perhaps it'll help you get over it.
It's the fact that it was a sort of lair. A sort of lair. A bit like the last time. Weirdly, it wasn't underwater that was most stressful. It's more before, when you imagine all kinds of things, you picture scenarios, you relive the accident, you relive like it's happening. You relive it in the first person, wondering, what would I have done? How would I have gotten through that? Because I don't have as much experience as Julien. I'm not as calm as he is. Maybe I wouldn't be as lucky as him when the shark struck here and not lower down on the throat, for example. You start reliving an accident in the first person, and it's really anxiety-inducing.
Ever since that day, I find it hard to relax when I dive. There's a before and an after. Because there's that moment when I thought we were going to lose someone. And there was that hour and a half of decompression when I reran the images in my head. I thought about the children, Ghislain and me, and I asked myself a lot of questions.
Emmanuelle has taken a step back. Having taken part in all the dives, now she goes less often. But in Rangiroa, on a site alongside the Tiputa Channel, a world-renowned paradise for divers, she rediscovers her taste for gathering underwater specimens. She once again experiences the powerful emotions of a deep dive. The stops are spent in the channel, a wonderful moment of release, when diving once again becomes a pleasure for the whole crew.
That's amazing. There are dolphins.
2.5 hours of dolphins, from the start of the dive to the end.
They hardly left our side for at least the whole first half of the dive.
Time has worked its magic. The anxieties have evaporated. And the data obtained during the expedition now makes the accident a distant memory. They put together the largest collection of crepuscular corals ever assembled. Above all, they redefine our knowledge of this environment, observing that the species capable of thriving at great depths are more numerous than previously believed.
One of the major learnings of the collection we've made so far is the observation that most of the coral species we've found near the surface are quite capable of living at depths of 100 to 120 meters. That's really something we were not expecting. That fuels the refuge theory, according to which corals are able to live in the depths and be in a way protected.
This collection forms the basis of a new hope that the deep corals may be capable of repopulating the surface reefs that have suffered so much. The data gathered by the sensors also yield some surprises. At 120 meters, the scientists discovered that the corals only receive 4% of the light, and yet they need it to survive. How do these creatures manage to live there? And just how deep can they go?
There are some islands where we could envisage carrying out deeper dives than usual, going beyond 120 meters. We go down and down as long as there are corals. Obviously, we couldn't do this everywhere, but there are some islands which lend themselves to this more than others. Have you got any ideas about where there are isles where we can stay down longer?
It's true, the Marquesas is not the right archipelago.
We go to the Gambier Islands for several reasons. On the one hand, as I often say, it's the archipelago at the end of the world, at the extreme southeast of the whole chain of the Trois Motus.
Lying 1,700 kilometers from Tahiti, the Gambier Archipelago is the most easterly in French Polynesia. Its geology, temperature, the clarity of its waters, and its little-known coral ecosystems make it an obvious choice to attempt some very deep dives to probe the limits of coral life. In Mangareva, one site seems ideal.
Do you know how deep Julien and Gaël are going to go today?
20 meters.
More, Robin.
120 meters.
Even more.
180 meters.
A bit less.
170 meters.
Something like that. Check.
The casual tone adopted with the kids belies a certain gravity. Ghislain and Julien are going to go down as far as the last coral on the slope. They have never before descended so far.
We start out on the slope and begin a descent that gets increasingly vertical, and the depths tick by. 130 meters, corals all around us. 140 meters, 150 meters, they're becoming more scarce. 160 meters, we can still spot them here and there. Julien and I stop at 170 meters. We're a long way from the surface. We've never been so deep before. We turn towards the rock face, and there in front of us is a coral.
A coral is thriving at a depth of exactly 171 meters. This coral is exceptional. It is the deepest ever recorded. The previous record was 165 meters, but this was simply an observation made from a submarine in the archipelago of Hawaii.
Depth 171.
Yes.
Well, Michel? 171 meters.
A new record.
What do you think of that?
It's the deepest coral sample ever taken anywhere in the world. We have pushed back the frontiers of reef corals. And that's very important because it shows that the lower limit is much deeper than was previously thought. It's extraordinary. It makes me very emotional. I've been working with corals for nearly 60 years. This is a crowning moment. Excuse me.
We're really happy to share that with you. It makes us really happy and proud. It's very touching to see Michel so moved by this discovery. And for us, it's true. We never thought we'd find a coral at 171 meters. At the start, we never thought we'd dive that deep. Michel's really over the moon.
We thought of you.
It was really emotional.
We even showed that in Polynesian waters, corals can be found that live at depths at which they've never been found before. So the whole vision we had of the reef and how it functions has been thrown into question because today you can't ignore these deep ecosystems and their contribution in how the reef works.
The Deep Hope mission has brought fresh light onto the coral reefs, demonstrating how depth is a key dimension in the survival of this fragile ecosystem.
They're down there, hanging onto the rock face, isolated in the half-light, yet thriving. It's an amazing discovery, and that alone justifies everything we've done. For me, it's a magnificent symbol of the meaning of underwater exploration.